Happy Easter and good morning or good evening to whatever time you are listening. My name is Father Jacob Rouse, and I'm the pastor of Notre Dame Parish in Cresco, Iowa, and I would like to welcome you to the Eucharistic Revival podcast.
Because that's the name we're going with.
Thank you, Father Kevin. Father Kevin, could you introduce yourself? He is my co-host and my brother priest, and he's going to tell you a little bit about where he is and what he's up to.
Yeah, I'm Father Kevin Earlywine, pastor of St. Patrick's in Hampton and St. Mary's in Ackley, Iowa, and happy to be here on the Eucharistic Revival podcast. And we have a couple guests with us today.
We do, a couple. We have two guests, Sarah and Liz, and they are both practitioners and teachers and educators in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And before we get into that, I'd like Sarah and Liz to briefly introduce themselves.
Well, my name is Sarah Burke, and I am a parishioner at St. Patrick in Cedar Falls, and I've been a catechist in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for 6 or 7 years. I'm currently the pre-K through 6th grade religious education coordinator, and just someone that's wondering about how to be closer to God, and this is the work of how we found it.
Mm-hmm.
I am Liz Koenigsfeld. I'm a parishioner here at St. Patrick's in Cedar Falls, and I have been a catechist with Catechesis of the Good Shepherd since 2019. I am trained for toddler, which is 0 to 3, level 1, which is 3 to 6, level 2, 6 to 9, and then partially trained in level 3, which is the 9 to 12-year-old. I'm currently serving in a level 2 atrium where we do lots of sacramental prep, and that's always a fun and joyous learning experience. Yeah.
And we're friends.
Yes.
You're great.
That's a great bonus.
Not enemies.
Yeah. So we're the topic today, obviously, is the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, and that is a form of education that helps Jesus' favorite people, young, small children, to come to learn more about the Catholic faith and about Him. Can you basically give kind of like a little intro to what Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is?
I would say that the easiest or this jumping off point that a lot of times catechists will use is that this method, we call it a method, not a curriculum, but the method is based on having a prepared space that is geared toward the age of the children that will be in it. That it is providing a space of peace and focus so that it can be a place to pray. But the role of the catechist is to, in its most simple state, to listen to God with children. And so generally we don't refer to ourselves as teachers. And it is, whether it be cliche or not, it's acknowledging that the only teacher in the room is God, and that we have the gift of being in a space to listen to God with these children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was CGS, as we shorten the term to, it was founded almost 70 years ago by two ladies, Gianna Gobi and Sofia Cavalletti, and they use this method. Did you already say Maria Montessori, from Maria Montessori? Some of us have heard there of the Montessori schools that are out there. So again, a prepared environment, which is just, it's a beautiful space to come and pray with God. It is filled with materials that are made for the scripture, for the presentations, for the children to work with at their own level. And it really allows them, and the adult too, to enter into prayer with them, to enter into this wonder of the scripture, of what God is trying to help us understand about His desire for us to know Him, and His desire for us to know how much He loves us and who we are to Him. And it just really, it's just a really beautiful way to experience our faith.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. You both say that you are, what was the word you used, mentors or facilitators?
Catechists.
Catechist, thank you. Yes, because when you are a teacher or a professor or a trainer, you are handing on information from your high and lofty pedestal. But I really like the philosophy that you've already brought to it, is that you are learning and receiving just as much as the children are, which I think is a really great place to be in, as far as humility and responding to the Holy Spirit. Can you, just to put us kind of in the frame of mind, the atrium is the classroom setting that you call it. Can you like walk us through what would be like the first 3 or 4 things that you would see when you walk into the atrium? Just take us on a little tour.
The word that we use or that you hear a lot is just a prepared environment. And so the hallmarks of that prepared environment are specifically in what you see, but maybe more importantly, what you don't see. We live in a really loud world, a world that's full of stimulus, and then we are gifted with this faith that is so rich, but sometimes subtle. And so we can't necessarily fully engage with God sometimes when we're in that loud, regular space. And so the atrium is, what you would notice is that it's a softer space, both in light and in sound. It's meant to feel home-like, and so there's not the efficiency of matching chairs and tables. You might see, an assortment of shelving, of tables, of textures, plants, flowers, things that in our regular life may seem uncommon. Um, but it is meant to feel different. It is meant to feel special and to be fully available for the child, no matter their age, not no matter their age, the age that the room is geared toward. So, Liz, you can speak more to this. If you walk into what we would refer to as a level 1 atrium, that's for 3 to 6 year old children. That's going to look very different than, say, a toddler atrium or a level 3 atrium that's geared toward 9 to 12 year olds. But what would you add to that, Liz?
Yeah, so every year when we begin, and even throughout the year, sometimes we will sit and discuss with the children, what is this place we come to be with God? And they'll describe it a lot of times as it feels like home. It's very homey. All these materials are handmade by someone in the parish, someone they probably know, and they find that fascinating. The main areas when we organize a room, there is a lot, in many of the atriums, there's a specific organization to it. And you'll notice your eye will be drawn to, in the very middle of the room, usually is the Good Shepherd table. And so you'll see these 2 sheepfolds, which are round boards that have they're green, and your eyes just drawn to that middle of that room, wondering what that could be. And then there's always a prayer table, and there's a corner that has baptism in it, and there's a corner with the altar, and all these beautiful and what seems so small and cute to us as adults, but to a child, they just breathe this sigh of, that's for me. And they get to use it, and they love working with these materials, especially as we show them more and more how much meaning all of it has for them.
Well, the space is also provided, again, in terms of things that are different, that might feel different or look different, whether to a child's eye or to an adult's eye, is that with limits, we have some conventions of, after you have been shown this work, you're invited to work with it anytime you choose. And so that is a foreign concept to many children, that we encounter initially, is that not only is this made for you, we are going to, you are going to have independence of when and how you use this. It offers so many points of growth, that independence of that a child may need to maybe drawn to work with something or repeat something over and over and over and over and over. In the same way that we as adults might find ourselves in our prayer life, we might read a verse, for the 50th time in our life, but that one time we really had to just dive deep into it. That happens with kids at every age. And it's really only the limitation of the materials in front of them that they get to really dig deeply into that. And so we see that a lot in this work and in that room.
Yeah.
A lot of chewing, marinating that's happening. The first opposite that I think of is I'm already in a mood of contemplation just hearing you describe it. But I think of, I don't know, Buffalo Wild Wings is the first place that I'll pick on. When you walk in there and sit down, there's a screen, then there's a tablet at my table, and there's all this noise and stuff, and all these things just like fighting for my attention. But it sounds like kind of the child is in charge when they go into the atrium, that they can just choose whichever contemplative act they'd like to participate in. So that's
yes.
really refreshing. Yeah. And then also in a church, sit and be quiet. Like, I mean, it's good to be in a church and have children come to mass, but this is giving them like the churchy vibe, but then giving them a place to explore. So I think that's extremely healthy.
And it's also, I mean, it directly leads to the Mass. I mean, it's what every work that we do in the atrium is helping provide that beautiful meaning, that deeper meaning, so that when the hope is that we can provide not only this vocabulary and the meaning behind the colors they see at Mass, the different articles used during the Mass. We provide not only a vocabulary, a meaning to not only the child, but to the parents as well, so that they can, at Mass, you have that child who's wiggling around, trying to get up and move because that's their language. Movement is their language. They need that. Well, let's move with our eyes. What do you see up there? What that ambo? What's going on up there? Do you see what Father's raising now? What do we call that? Do you remember the name? Do you see him hold the paten, and what's on the paten? It's involving them in the Mass by explaining, but to only the extent in which they can absorb it at their age.
Rich food in small bites. This method gives undiluted scripture, undiluted liturgy, undiluted gesture, but in small age appropriate bites. And then gifts them, I'll use the word gift very intentionally, gifts them with enough time and enough quiet so that they can think and respond. And to your comparison of Buffalo Wild Wings, oftentimes in our own, we do our children a disservice unintentionally, as whether it be as parents, as educators, as aunts and uncles, to assume that they're not ready for something, or to drag them in or out of something that they don't know what they're ready to receive. And this, through the wisdom of the founder 70 years ago, of Sofia Cavalletti, that she learned what was appropriate in these spaces and chose the works that are in these spaces based on what children responded to through observation. So it's by watching and listening and trusting, not, obviously the church and its teachings, but also the children and how they responded.
And through her own humility of just learning and saying, well, that didn't work. So we need to find a different way to be able to deliver this word, and then sit and ponder with them and see what fruit comes from it, so.
And I think that any catechist who's in a room with children, whether it be little kids or teenagers or even adults, is familiar with that moment of humility of, ooh, that didn't work. But this method walks hand in hand with the developmental readiness of a child at every single age, and then goes from there.
I love that. One thing that so strikes me about it, and you kind of already started touching on this, but it really helps children, and I think a lot of adults need to learn this, but just that contemplative spirit, because like so much of Mass and liturgy uses symbols, right? And I think even for a lot of adults nowadays, they can just to really prayerfully enter into the Mass, you need that contemplative spirit to contemplate there's a layers of symbols there that are so full of meaning, but we have so much of the Buffalo Wild Wings mentality, right? That it's just like a brief stimulant thing, and then but it's shallow, right? And we don't really sit with it, to um but when we know these, but part of stories are part of symbols is the stories connected with them, our experiences associated with that thing, that we realize it's layered with meaning. And so providing the space to really like allow that, right? To then all of a sudden things that matter, like it, and it's conditioning children for that, really, to pray the mass well, of because then it's not just like, oh, Father's got a cup up there, but it's but it's like, oh, I have a tangible experience with this, with my own little version of this chalice. But also then the whole thing of like, oh, learning of like, there's a whole story connected with that, of Jesus with his disciples, that they've had a tangible interaction of like moving little pieces around, but also like connecting that to like the family dinner table at home, but also then learning about like this good shepherd who gives his life for his sheep, right? And that all of a sudden that all starts to be connected. And it can be amazing to see, like, first of all, I think many adults need to learn that, right? Like we ourselves, I think so many people, I know adults who like mass is boring, and it's like, and I think it's just, well, we just haven't learned to really like pray the mass, to take the time and space to really contemplate. Like, it's so easy to make it that, well, we have to stimulate people, and rather it's and I love that image of the prepared space, because that's really the liturgical mindset of the church, right? Is preparing a space that we come and we're drawn into this mystery. And especially when you go into an old beautiful church, the whole idea is the whole space, especially those old ones with arches and stained glass windows and statues. It's all meant to like engage all of your senses, but into this place of contemplation. You enter into this prepared space and then are drawn into it. And so, like, in a small way, that's what Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is doing for children, which I think adults need more Catechesis of the Good Shepherd.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
The children are much better open to this than the adults are.
Yeah.
I worry far less about a child than the adults. And I'll say that with this method, the thing that is, just I hesitate to say the genius of the method, because the genius is in God's plan. And this method is echoing God's plan. So there is, there's some, just this, it is well, and it's inspired by the Holy Spirit, and it does nothing more than echoing what already exists in terms of the truth of God's plan and this church. But what I'll say of something that is, I think, significant is that you look to an 18-month-old or a 15-month-old and say, what are they ready to receive in terms of, if we use the example of moral formation, what's the first step of moral formation other than just managing ourselves? And then, you move into a 3 to 6 year old child, and it's really that same, it grows with them. And it isn't until we get to that, 6, 7, 8 year old child that moral formation looks familiar to our adult eyes, of, hearing the maxims of Jesus of, do good to those who hate you, or living, but like first came that living with community. And so all of these things grow far before, we would think to give the rulesy adult lesson, but is contingent on the developmental stage of the child. The other, I think, best example that, you can point to, or one example that we can point to, is how, we don't start with explaining a textbook's definition of what real presence is in the Eucharist. We isolate it down to one single gesture. In CGS, I'm trying to think if there's anything that precedes this, but beginning by presenting that gesture and asking a question, not starting with an explanation, but starting with a question of, what did you see? And then growing from there, high to low, over a chalice, naming it, saying, this is the gesture of epiclesis. This is thinking about, what do 3 to 6 year olds relate to? They understand what a gift is. This is a gift of the Holy Spirit to transform bread and wine.
Mhm.
That's it. We give that to them at 3
Mhm.
and at 4 and at 5
At 6 and
and
at
at 6
7
and at
and
7
8, and it just keeps
and
it
40.
never leaves.
It never leaves. But then all of these works grow to, okay, now you understand what a gift is. Okay, what's our response? What's the gesture of response in terms of offering? I'm realizing I'm doing visible gestures on a podcast, which is particularly not effective. But we have these works that grow.
Mhm.
That's fine. I was just going to explain that what Sarah did is hands about face level and then slowly being put like lowered down over the child. This is called the Greek word epiklesis, which means calling down of the Holy Spirit. And you'll see your priest do this in Mass in some way. But to have a child just recognize that, having Sarah and Liz and whoever the catechist is demonstrate this and say, this is what the priest is going to do, and then watch for it when you see it in Mass. That's, like you said, rich food in small bites.
Mhm.
And I didn't learn what epiklesis was until 3 years into seminary. So I'm impressed that there are
Yeah.
3-year-olds that know what epiklesis is.
A lot of 3-year-olds that not only know it but love it.
They
You
look
know,
for it. They'll point it out. You'll see in Mass some children pointing up, like, watch here. You know?
it's time. It's time.
It's almost
then if
sad when we're all
if your
kneeling
church-
and it happens too quickly, and you're like, no.
if your church happens to employ bell ringing at that time too, that even just cements it
Yes,
into
some
your
churches do,
neurons.
Right.
So I'm sure you're both familiar and have experienced the ancient and venerable art of making children learn things from a textbook as you pontificate from the front of the classroom. What converted you from from that method to this? How did you discover this and awaken to its benefits? And then what changes has it made in your own faith life?
Well, I'll start. I'll try not to go too deep into my own background, but I think it helps to kind of understand why I'm so on fire for this. So I am a cradle Catholic, grew up in a small German community. We attended Mass every Sunday. We sang in the choir. I knew the things to do. I knew I was Catholic. I knew it was important. I didn't know why. And I never had a lot of feeling. And I knew that was probably something I was missing. As I continued to get older, though, I could feel myself just being like, well, I know. And when I got into college, I know I should be going to Mass, but I'm busy. I got schoolwork to do, and I didn't make it a priority. So it's like I knew, but I didn't really know. And it wasn't until I had some things happen in my life where I had voices, or I had just things happen there. I was like, someone is telling me something. I need to change this situation in my life. And at the time I was dating someone, and it was a long relationship, and I knew that I needed to probably leave it. And I just kept having that pull. I needed to get out of this. And when I finally had the courage to do so, I very quickly met my future husband. And I was not thrilled about that, because I was like, no, I think I'm not supposed to be doing this. But the pull was so strong that I stuck with it. And after meeting his family, his father, we went through all the conversations of, what are you going to do after college, and what are your plans? He just cut right through it and said, so what is your relationship with Jesus? And I was like, I looked around. I was like, am I supposed to answer that? What? What do you mean? Like, that's something you can have? And he told me his story about, how he kind of found that relationship through a core group of men that he had worked with. And it was then that I was like, that's what I'm missing. I'm missing a relationship. That's that feeling, that love that I didn't even know, but it makes sense. Okay, so how do I do this? How do I go about finding this relationship and nurturing it? Because that's what you do with a relationship, right? So I started going to Bible studies. I'm like, for sure, Bible studies, this will do it. So and it was great. I learned a lot more about different stories in the Bible, the people, but I was learning knowledge and I was not gaining the emotional connection that I needed.
Mhm.
And my husband, and at the time, we were getting ready to have kids. And so our conversation shifted toward, well, how do we approach our faith and our children? How do we teach them this? Because I was still like, I still don't know anything. I cannot teach anybody anything right now. And I just kept remembering my upbringing with sitting at the table at during RE and our religious education, and just thinking, I'm reading. I didn't at this time in my life, I still did not know how to look anything up in the Bible. I remember going to RE and having a Bible in front of me and just looking lost at other people around me trying to figure out where to find things. At
Mhm.
this time, I did not know anything about the makeup of the Bible. Um, it was very embarrassing to say that I was Catholic and that I had grown up Catholic and I knew so
Mhm.
little. So I was determined to not be a parent that could not teach my children more than I had ever known when I was growing up. Um, so one day in mass, I read the bulletin, and I had noticed that there was going to be, for 3 to 6 year old children, a Catechesis of the Good Shepherd atrium offered one time a week for 90 minutes. And at the time, so this was, I had a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and I was staying home with them. And I thought, perfect, my son Jack, I'm going to sign him up.
Mhm.
And the next week in the back of church, Miss Sarah.
This was a really big moment in my life, and I didn't even know it.
I had never met Sarah before. And actually, so Sarah was singing. She was the
Mhm.
cantor that day at Mass, and her husband was in the back. And I walked back there, and they had set up all of these beautiful materials. And of course, not knowing anything, like, oh, these are so cute, And
Mhm.
I told Patrick, I said, your wife's voice is just beautiful. I'm so grateful she sang today. And he's like, oh yeah, she's wonderful. And then I said, well, tell me more about this. And then I signed my son up, and he was in the atrium that next fall. Um, Fast forward to, I guess it was February of his first year. I had picked up my son from atrium, and Miss Tracy was his catechist at the time, and she invited me to stay for a presentation for the next week. And she said, we'll be showing him the cynical. And I said, great. I don't know what the cynical is, but okay. Sounds great. I can't wait to experience this.
Mhm.
Because it was mysterious. I didn't, as a parent, I just dropped him up and picked him up. I didn't know what happened in there. And he's 3, so he's not yet able to communicate a lot of what he's experiencing,
Mhm.
not verbally anyway. And so the next week I show up, and I enter into this beautiful kind of darkened room with just almost natural light and some lamps around, and she has it all set up, and we sit, and a candle is lit, and she reads scripture from the Bible. We hear it once, and I'm like, oh, I'm familiar with this. Okay, it's the Last Supper. That's okay.
Mhm.
I don't know what the cynical nonsense is yet. Let me find out. So then she brings out this material, and it is this wooden made room. We call them dioramas. And there's a table, a long table inside, and she brings out um, small peg figures, and she sets them around the table, and she continues to read, and then she'll move some pieces, and then she stops when the reading is over, and she places the crucifix on the table to identify when Jesus died. But then she lights the candles, and she says, Jesus has died. Jesus is risen. She lights each one separately. And I just sat there floored. Like I felt like I was in the room with Jesus at the Last Supper. And I was like, how many times in my life have I heard these words repeated at Mass and have never understood what we were doing at Mass?
Mhm.
And forever, it still is my favorite presentation. And once I was trained in level 2 to see it have grown with the child, in level 3, it's just been beautiful. I knew at that moment that I wanted this for myself. I wanted to be a catechist because I knew I could learn more. I thought, I've always wanted to be a catechist, but I don't have enough knowledge to ever try to teach someone else. So this is my opportunity. I'm going to get trained. I had no idea that just being trained in it, receiving the knowledge, was going to be the start of my relationship. It was going to help me understand how to have that.
Well, and I think that my experience, so I am actually an adult convert. So I was raised Lutheran, went to church every Sunday, did the expected things, had my first communion, was confirmed on, Reformation Sunday. I knew who Martin Luther was. Like, I knew the Counter Reformation, but I knew that I was loved. I knew that Jesus loved me. That was echoed. Um, but then I was getting ready to be married in my early 20s. And my husband has 4 sisters, and all of the ones who had been married, they had met and dated non-Catholics who had dutifully converted.
Mhm.
And so I entered into RCIA, in preparation to this, and I started, and it was a reasonable program, but it was very fact driven.
Mhm.
And I had um, uh, I went through, and I had, in the preparation, I think I'd gone through the rite of election. Um, and then I had a conversation with the person that was coordinating the program, and she gave me the best gift in the world. That she said, Sarah, if now is not the right time, if you are not yet ready, then don't feel like you need to do this for someone else. This has to be for you. And so I felt this, again, I describe it's this huge gift of like, oh, I'm not yet ready, and it's okay if I take more time. So fast forward, I got married, the world did not end, that I did not convert then. It felt like it would, but it didn't.
Mhm.
I went through RCIA just because I'd gotten through a lot of the worries and obstacles and whatever. And I joined the church on Easter, at the Easter Vigil. It was beautiful, but I felt like I was people were telling me congratulations for becoming Catholic, and I felt like I was wearing someone else's clothes. And
Mhm.
so, I knew that I was loved. I knew that I didn't have any like concerns that I didn't believe something, but
Mhm.
I believed the facts. I didn't believe the the mystery of it, the
Mhm.
feeling of it. And so fast forward to then I mean, this is 2013. I was going through a level 1 training. And I know that this question started from, when have you ever been converted from a book program to CGS? Why does that matter? Um, but when I was going through my CGS level 1 training, we were doing a presentation of the preparation of the chalice. So I love that I'm talking to 2 priests right now because, you know, for me, the preparation of the chalice is the most incredibly mind-blowing moment in the mass. It is
Mhm.
amazing. But here I
Mhm.
am I'm crossing this bridge. So I don't know how old I was, maybe 27, 28, 29 at the time. And they set it out. And again, keep in mind of this method, if we were to only say the preparation of the chalice is, and then fill in the blank, when you found the completed answer, you would feel done as the learner. The mystery,
Mhm.
you would have checked the
Mhm.
boxes, the mystery would have been solved. You would have turned the page both in your mind and physically. You'd have said, I got the right answer, I'm done. The way that it's presented in CGS is this: you're sitting around a round table, white tablecloth, with 2 model cruets of a wine. So it's just small pitchers, a wine and a water, and then a small model chalice. Now, in the mass, we would only ever use, what is it, unpenetrable metals or whatever
Mhm.
material. We use
Mhm.
glass so that we can see
Mm.
the liquids combining.
Mhm.
So, to set the stage, the presentation begins where the catechist slowly and completely pours the wine,
Mhm.
allows for silence. Enough silence so that you see truly every last drop, and then sets it down. And then picks up the water cruet.
Mhm.
Oh, so slowly. The anticipation. One drop,
Mm.
and sets it down. Allows for silence. And then says, what did you see? And I don't care if you're an adult or a 3-year-old, you saw every last drop of that wine poured out, and you saw the single drop of the water. Okay, well, what might that wine represent? Like, oh, well, okay. Jesus. Okay. How much of that wine was poured out? How much did he give? All of it. Every last drop. Okay, well, if the wine represents Jesus, who might that water represent? Now, this is what's fun as a catechist, because the child might not come to that it represents a person or themselves or humanity, initially, but that's okay. We're giving them enough time to discover it themselves, because it is not about them finding the exact right answer in the adult's timeline. It's about them discovering it for themselves. But when they do, the water's us. Could you ever separate that drop of water from that wine? No. So all of a sudden, as an adult and also as a child, like, how could I possibly be separated? All of a sudden, I had my eyes opened to the richness of the liturgy. Okay, if I'm having my mind blown by just this preparation of the chalice, what other mysteries are there to uncover? And the answer is that there's limitless mysteries to uncover in our faith and in our liturgy. And the importance of that revelation for me wasn't in the fact that I had the information. It was in the fact that I was wondering about it, that I was saying, what else could there be? And so that ownership of faith, that adoption of understanding, of belief, of faith, was what kind of lit my fire. All of a sudden, I wasn't wearing someone else's faith to be a compliant person, agreeable person. I was doing it because it was there for me. It was this gift for me from God. And so in terms of this method, and other faith formation models, when we introduce this program to other people, and when we were introducing it to this parish, something that I would say a lot was, this is not the easiest or cheapest way to do this. But it is a way that is effective. And it's offered as gift that must be accepted. And that is so challenging, particularly in parishes that face, whether it be financial constraints, we're a larger parish. And so we don't have the responsibility of only serving 60 kids. We have the responsibility of serving 260 kids. And so the reason that people do choose book programs is the efficiency, is but the fruits that come with this method are the adult formation, or the gift that comes is with the adult formation. And then it's able to be shared. But I think before we were formally discussing today, we were talking about how this is a mustard seed work. Parables are offered in the atrium, as this is a parable, is a story that Jesus told that has a deeper mystery to uncover. One of those parables that's shared to every child from the time they're 3 to the time they're 12 is the mustard seed, and it reflects the mysteries of the kingdom of God. It also really reflects, the work that we do in CGS, is that we are not responsible for providing a comprehensive list of facts to our kids. We are charged with only planting seeds and providing an environment for it to grow. We have to trust that God created them with the capacity to internalize and respond to this love. It's really beautiful and really scary.
It is. And I love that you use the language of mystery, because I think, unfortunately, in our modern day, I think that's somewhat what's lost, is like encountering God is a mystery, and we have reduced him to just like facts and information. But when I talk to people about the Mass or teach about the Mass, I talk about how it is encountering mystery, and we had a professor at Mundelein in seminary who would talk about the language of mystery, and the language of mystery is not lectures and essays. Like the language of mystery is, I think he used sign, symbol, and paradox, sign, puzzle, and paradox, or something like that. But I've adapted it to use to talk about how to encounter mystery, to communicate mystery. We use symbols and story and beauty, and how that is incorporated into the Mass. And it's not just uh a dissertation about the theology of God, but it's who is God. Well, come and experience him, and come and experience him through these symbols, symbols, through this beauty, through this encounter with beauty, and let me tell you a story, you know and that's what works on us on such a deeper level, kind of that symbolic contemplation like I talk about. I loved how you shared just the sitting with the symbol of the water and the wine, and how simple that is, just like, oh, you just poured water into wine. But then it really teaches that, like I said before, the symbolic contemplation, like how this is so rich and layered with meaning, and allowing the space to really allow that to work on us, because that's it.
It makes the mystery visible.
Yeah, yes, which is, I mean, that is what we would call sacramentality, right? That's the whole idea of our sacramental worldview as Catholics. It's the mystery made visible to us, tangible and visible. But it's still a mystery, so it also works on us, right? Yeah. So thank you both for
Yeah.
sharing.
Sarah, I was on the edge of my seat listening to you talk about that simple and small, short demonstration. I will never think of that portion of Mass the same way again. I feel like you just took Thomistic theology and laced Paw Patrol fruit snacks with it and just served it to us. Like you, once again, I think I found the episode title, Rich Food in Small Bites. The other image that came to mind was if you've ever watched dads or families at pools teaching them how to swim, sometimes the dad will chuck them in the water, or sometimes they'll teach them how to jump off the side by being in the pool. But what really happens is when the dad or the parent grabs the child's hand and they both jump in together, and then the water envelops both of them, and they're both diving headfirst into the mystery. And that's what I really like about this method, is that you, Sarah and Liz and the catechists, you don't know everything, and you're the first ones to admit that, and you're just jumping into the deep end of the pool with the children, and that's a really profound way to lead others into the mystery.
It's the most comfortable thing. I mean, the most comfortable and uncomfortable thing I've ever done with our faith is just knowing that if the child is with us in the atrium, there's not many other better places they can be. They're there in prayer. They're there hearing, experiencing, feeling loved by the Good Shepherd. And I don't know it all. And being able, my favorite thing to be able to say is, I wonder. I wonder. Because that's not something you hear very often, and then are asked to actually wonder about it.
The gift of, so being a catechist, I meant to say this earlier, but I'm experienced in the method of CGS, as experienced as you can be in something for 6 years. It's so not relatively not a lot, but more experienced in CGS than anything else. But I'm very new to ministry. And so I'm having a lot of conversations recently of catechists in traditional formats, of the pains that they go through and the reasons that they don't want to do it. And one of the reasons, managing behaviors is something that's mentioned all the time. The other things that's talked about is afraid of not knowing, afraid of saying the wrong thing. And, to become a catechist in this method, the reason that catechists are so well prepared is because they invest a number of hours in preparation, and it can seem like an obstacle before you begin, and it seems like such a gift on the other side, because all of your adult learning, whether you're ever a catechist or not, you don't have to give that back. But in this adult formation, you are released from this expectation of this obstacle of knowingness. Like,
Mm-hmm.
before I can teach you all of the facts of the Catholic Church, I must know all of the facts of the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Untrue.
Mm-hmm.
You must be willing to wonder, because it's all a mystery. We were created in God's image and likeness, but we don't see his full plan. It is slowly unfolding over an unimaginable amount of time, and these mysteries are bigger than we can ever hope to fully understand. So, with that caveat, let's just enjoy them and wonder together.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so releasing ourselves from that pressure of fitting God's love and truth into a box. Once we, like, if we can get our adults to enter into being a catechist, or into being just a wondering Catholic themselves, of just saying, let's set aside this expectation of knowing all of the things, and instead really lifting up this concept of wonder and enjoyment of his beauty. All of a sudden, the gifts just start unfolding themselves, and you're just in constant revelation of the thing that is new that you discovered. And so that is when you're making your mind like a child. Like, the children come to it really easily. Of It's never crossed their mind that they need to understand anything when they're a 4-year-old. The whole world is unfolding in front of them. And so, I mean, it's pretty telling. Like, Jesus didn't write to make yourself like the smartest adult in the room.
Mm-hmm.
He said to make yourself like a child. And it
Mm-hmm.
is that gift of wonder, that gift of
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. This method isn't teaching a comprehensive list of facts. It's teaching these fundamentals of what can you wonder about?
Mm-hmm.
What essential parts of the Mass and the liturgy exist? Understanding what epiclesis is. That's pretty important. Understanding that the Eucharist, jump in, Liz, what's essential in this work that is taught?
The love of the Good Shepherd.
The persistent love of the Good Shepherd. He knows your name. He will never leave you.
Mm-hmm.
Calls you to a very special place and a very particular time in the Mass, and he calls us all the time to be with him that way. And that it is a profound thing to discover, how wanted you are always and forever, and to know that you don't just come to Mass, you are desired wholeheartedly to be there with him.
For our sacramental prep, it's unsettling to some, the format of CGS sacramental prep, only because it distills back what is the most simple and essential. It presents, first reconciliation and first communion kind of in a way of a gate versus a finish line. And so, having an understanding that, just the idea of a examination of conscience. How do we do that? We do it through the maxims, to know how it is to live. But truly stepping back and saying, the most important thing is that God just wants us to remain with him, remain in his love. Okay, how do we do that? Are there ever obstacles that prevent us from remaining in his love? How the church gives us a gift to remove those obstacles. And that is in that reconciliation. Now we can learn the way that he wants to live through some of these parables that he told. The parable of the found sheep, the parable of the found coin. Did the sheep know it was lost? Maybe, maybe not. Did the coin know that it was lost? Oh, I don't know. But again, with children and adults alike, we're not giving them a comprehensive list of facts. We're giving them tools to wonder about the words that God has already given us in the Bible, by the liturgy that is celebrated every single week at Mass. And so it's so much abstract concepts that the adults struggle with it more than the kids. But it does reflect the beauty of the church.
It definitely is more of an avenue toward, let's solidify, let's enhance, let's beautify this relationship before we just make you feel like there's all these rules to being loved by God. And it's like, no, wait a second. That his love is never going away. This is who you are to him. And that relationship without rules is where you start to notice, or sorry, the rules without relationship
Rules
is
without
where
relationship.
you notice the departure, of the desire to understand, the desire to seek the mysteries. So it's, to me, it's always been, since learning the CGS method for the sacramental prep, is let's make sure that that relationship is strong. That's so important, because then they're not rules. It's just a way to live. It's just because when you're in relationship with some, you want that relationship to flourish and to be beautiful. You don't want anything to harm it. And so you're going to do everything possible to make sure you remain, right? That's what this presents to them. And in hopes that we can start at toddler, 3 years old, and that relationship is so strong that their initial response to you, they're like, right, smack you in the face. Hey, no, the good shepherd loves me. I'm never going to follow anybody else because that's not my good shepherd. And they'll just spout all that off to you once they know it. They'll just say, oh no, they would never follow the voice of a stranger. They don't know him, It's like, I hope, I want you to always remember that, right? Listen for his voice.
So beautiful.
I'm glad you brought up the idea that, Sarah, you, and I'm sure Liz would agree too, that you both are as trained as you can be to be catechists. And then Father Kevin and I are technically as trained as we can be to be priests. Like, we went through 6 or 7 years of seminary and we say mass every day. Like, the same thing applies to motherhood. And I think any other job or vocation, like, okay, you've given birth, great. You're as trained as you can be to be a mother. But like, none of us in this podcast room have all the answers, even though we're technically all trained, So I really think perfection is the enemy of the good. And once again, just to hammer that home, that you're probably not ready to lead others, but God didn't ask you to be ready. He asked you to just be faithful, So I'm just going to keep doing it,
Yep. At this time of year, so our CGS program serves about 160 kids on any given week. And then our parish, that's pre-K through 6th grade. We do have an additional 45 kids in a traditional program that we can't yet serve. We don't have the catechist for it. But it is the concept of readiness, the concept of being enough is such a threat to trying, and we're so insufficiently prepared. But the thing that's beautiful about this method, again, is that rejection of knowingness, that rejection of perfection, if I can say that. But just, it's an experimental work. We are going to provide this room for these children. We are going to follow these basic setups of any given session, but we are going to trust that God is the teacher, and we are going to listen to his words with these kids and provide, again, enough time and enough quiet for the children to respond, so that it's not my relationship that I'm putting on you, or my faith that I'm putting on you. I'm giving you space to create your own relationship. And I think that's probably the most important hallmark, that gift of time, so that they can respond. Because at 2, 3, 4 years old, they may not have the words to respond right away. So we're going to give them another way. We're going to give them, physical materials for them to work with, so they can continue to think about it. We're going to give them basic art supplies, so that their response might not be with words. It might be with drawings or art or visual representations. As they get older, we're going to give them age appropriate lessons. We're going to give them age appropriate ways of responding, so that, again, it's not my faith that I'm putting on you. It is what you are always going to be able to discover for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, as a parent, Father Ross, I really appreciated just the perfection is such an enemy. It is a huge relief to be able to say, I'm not sure, but I know we've got people we can ask, or we can look this up. Just I didn't necessarily grow up with that mentality. I always felt like I needed to know before I could,
Mm-hmm.
tell anyone any other information. I needed to be sure of it. And this work has just opened up that possibility of this mystery is maybe right now is not when I'm supposed to understand this. It's
Mm-hmm.
coming. Like it will be revealed in God's time. His time is
Mm-hmm.
not our time. And
At the Parousia.
Yeah.
I think there's a
Um,
Bible verse on that, isn't there? God's ways are not our ways,
yeah. So
Mhm.
it's just been a humbling experience, but also such a relief
Mhm.
to just take a deep breath and know that when my child has a question, I can say, we can figure this out, or we can wait and we can listen a little bit more. Um, and for any parent out there listening to this, your children are going to vex you with questions, as I'm sure they already have. If they haven't, they will. And it's okay to just say, I wonder. That's something we can think more about. Let's see if we can find somebody who can shed light on that for us. Or but
Mhm.
but to have just the best outlook on any question as, we'll find this together, we'll wonder
Mhm.
together.
What does Father say about that? What does the church say about that? What does the
Mm-hmm.
Bible say about that? Instead of having to have your adult contribution of what is
Mm-hmm.
what is the fill in the blank answer.
Mhm.
Because I mean, we are humans, for goodness sake. Like
Mhm.
there's so much messiness
Mhm.
in how we are and how we respond to things.
Mhm.
Let's continue to point back to what's essential. What is real, what is true? What is true?
Mhm.
Okay, the Bible is true.
Mhm. Very early on in this podcast series, we talked about the Eucharist as the source and the summit, right? And so we came to this image of the mountain, and kind of that image of like encountering mystery. It's like encountering this mountain, right? That we can explore, we can discover, but just like a mountain, like you can never wrap your arms all the way around the mountain at one time, right? I mean, you can try and hug a mountain, but you only get so far. But you can shimmy around and move around the mountain and explore, right? The many facets,
Play.
and you can
Mhm.
play on the mountain. Yes, and that's like it seems a lot of what you're saying is like that invitation to wonder. It's that invitation to encounter mystery, the mystery of that mountain, and this that that is God, right? And that can
Mhm.
be explored and like, well, I don't know, where does this trail go? Well, let's see, I wonder, let's end this invitation to explore and to experience and encounter like the
Mhm.
mystery of God together, and particular way we encounter that as community, right, in the Mass, which connects to this whole Eucharistic revival thing. So
Mhm. Well, and
yeah.
just the subject matter of your podcast, the Eucharistic revival,
Mm-hmm.
the Eucharistic minister or mystery, you
Mm-hmm.
know, how does the CGS method draw children closer to the mystery of the Eucharist? And
Mm-hmm.
Liz and I were talking about that, and we were saying, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's in everything.
I was like,
Mm-hmm.
which presentation do we
Which
talk about? I
which
mean, all.
presentation doesn't point to that? And it's to your
Mm-hmm.
point that that the Eucharist is the source and summit. So
Mm-hmm.
of course, there's nothing that isn't relevant. You know,
Mm-hmm.
th- it's all going to be in small bites that stand alone or may seem like they stand alone, but like understanding that um the the Eucharist, like called to the table in a particular way. The Good Shepherd calls us by name to the Mass to share in this meal. Does he only call us? Does he only call people in Cedar Falls? Does he only call people in 2024? Who is gathering around this table?
Mm-hmm.
And to have, over the course of years, to have
Mm-hmm.
children discover on their own that it's not just me, it's not just people that are right here, right now. It's all people that ever were, all people that ever will be gathering around this table. We are all invited, and we have to respond. But we are all invited. Like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So profound.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great lead into my next question. I have a very dear friend in South Bend, Indiana, who she's an atrium catechist as well. She's got her own 5 children, and then her atrium children, and she's talked about doing the epiclesis and mimicking those things and doing everything that you just said. So my point is that this is not just a Sarah and Liz Waterloo, Cedar Falls area thing. Like this is big. So if someone was listening to this podcast and they thought maybe I kind of want to try that, or maybe I want to start that at my parish, what would be some just the first basic steps of how would you get this sort of thing at your parish, or how would you go about getting trained?
You would go to the website. It's cgsusa.org, www.cgsusa.org.
I'll put
That's
that in the show
the
notes.
United States National Organization website. You can find all trainings, any number of parent and parish resources. On a practical side, I would say reach out to someone who is already a catechist. We frequently have people call the parish, just to talk about it, just to dip their toe in the water. But I would say that even if you are not yet ready, I'm using my catechist voice. If you are not yet ready to start an atrium at your church, there are a number of book titles that we could recommend that talk about this work in more detail. But attending a catechist formation is, I think, the most helpful thing. It'll offer a tremendous amount of adult formation, but it will also prepare you to be a catechist insufficiently. Each level of training is substantial. It's a level 1 training is about 90 hours. And again, on the front side of it, you're saying, how could it possibly take 90 hours to train me to be a catechist for 3 to 6 year olds? Well, it is training you to be a catechist for 3 to 6 year olds, but it's also orienting your brain and your heart to wonder and to unfolding the mysteries of the church. It is the most profound faith formation that I have ever gone through. It affected my personal faith. It affected my parenting.
Affected my relationship with my spouse and all other relationships around me.
How I see other people, like it's such a gift. But again, like to piggyback on what you said, I'm going to use some of my notes that I wrote. But Catechesis of the Good Shepherd has grown and spread to more than 65 countries in the world. So that is, whether you're in Australia or Colombia or China or the United States or Mexico, whether you are in the most wealthy parish in the world, or you're a missionary of charity running your CGS atrium out of a van, in the same way that the liturgy of the Catholic Church and the plan of God and the love of God is available to all people at all times, like this work adapts and feeds humans at their natural level, at the way that God made them. And so it's able to be adapted to any number of scenarios.
Well, I
That
mean,
work.
there's been families that we know who you have it in your basement. I mean, if that's something you desire, whatever level you can grasp at it. If you're looking, even being able to observe a working atrium is a really great way just to understand, like just to get a glimpse at what is happening.
What is happening?
What is happening? It is. Sometimes we feel like we have our own language at times, and so it's great to actually observe an atrium if you can. There are lots. It's a very big. It's a very, I don't want to say movement, but it's a big organization here in Iowa, especially. I mean, I was able to talk to my sister who lives in Southern Indiana about it, and she started one down there. She got trained and started one down there. So I mean, it can touch everyone, and their website does a good job of directing you to when there's trainings, where there are atriums, in which parishes. So definitely.
I will say on a practical level, I mentioned, I think earlier in the episode, Liz was talking about her first encounter with a parish display of when she discovered CGS for the first time. And I was saying that was such a big moment in my life, is that we started with 3 people in our catechists in our program, and we built this atrium. It's a lot of work. We were tired.
Mm-hmm.
We were also isolated. We weren't necessarily digging into a deeper community. We saw it as work, not as community, or we saw the pressure of a deadline. The best thing that you can do for yourself if you want to learn more about this work is to get to know people that are in this work. It we are companions on a journey. We are doing this, and you're doing it right when you find joy and peace. And that's an indicator in the atrium if a child is receiving something well, joy and peace. If they're unsettled, we as adults are charged with the question of why. And so if in the catechism that you're offering in your parish right now, you're not finding joy and peace, ask why. It doesn't mean it needs to be fixed instantly, but we should ask why. If you're starting this program in your parish and you're not feeling joy and peace, ask why. Surround yourself with more people. I laugh because it's such a big work, and it's such a reflection of how we live, that it's never perfect. And if you can't laugh about it, you're in trouble.
I want to say too, just you saying, if not just in your atrium, but even in your life, you are not finding joy and peace. Let us keep searching, and maybe finding a CGS atrium and getting to know this work, maybe will bring some to you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that the atrium, the prepared space that we set up for the children to enter, shouldn't our hearts really be an atrium and like be a prepared space for Jesus to come in? And because if I'm really in my own like recent years of my own addiction recovery and life, I've just completely thrown up my hands to the fact that I am a toddler. I need to go to bed at the same time. I need to make certain meals at the same time. I say mass at a certain time. I'm a toddler and I need routine. And I think prayer and discipline and all those things are like that. So if our hearts are atriums, then Jesus can just come in and play with what he wants to.
I wonder.
And with that, we're at an hour and we're coming to the end of our episode. So thank you so much, and and let us continue to be oriented towards wonder, especially towards the Eucharistic mystery. And thank you so much for what you guys are doing and for your own yes to the Lord, especially in building up this program that is orienting both children and adults more towards wonder and towards the Eucharistic mystery. So thank you. Yeah.
See you in the Eucharist.
See you soon, all people of all times.
Thank you.